Here I am.
I do.
Repeat it after me. I am. Here I am. It's amazing how babies, when born, are fragile, playful, noisy sometimes, all the time. But something that has always fascinated me was the grip that a baby can muster. If a baby gets anything in their hand, getting it out finger by finger is an impossible task. And babies are genetically built for that hand grip. And I think it's important that they do think of themselves, because it seems to be a selfish action or reaction to preserve themselves, because they only have themselves in the world, newly entered into this cold, cruel world. And so baby starts off, and after 6 months, when they realize that actually this is my mother, this is my brother, this is my father, and food is coming, I don't have to grab it and keep it and, try and have it all to myself. But gradually, through experiences, through nurture, their hands start opening out. And as a child grows, they have a better sense of themselves. First, their nuclear family, and then extending out. And some of us in our lives, as our hands open, our impact or influence extends far and wide beyond where we can even see, and beyond boundaries and realms. Some of us don't open our hands fully, some half, and so on. Everyone's experience is unique. I would like to share with you my experience, how an ordinary life in ordinary circumstances was influenced by events and occurrences that I believe opened my hands over the years and led me to this organization called Rotary when I was well into my 50s. And so, let me start at the beginning and tell you my story. I am the fourth born in a family of 6. 3 boys, 3 girls. Isn't that perfect? And being number 4, really I had no care in the world. I could play, I could enjoy myself under the comfort of my elder brothers and sisters, and dominate and disturb my younger brother and sister. That was life. And my parents called me Leo. My father was one of the pioneer broadcasters in radio and TV in Kenya. And my mother, before I leave my father was fluent, proficient in English, Kiswahili, Kikamba, you name it, because it's important for what I'll tell you shortly. My mother, well, she was many things. In her younger life, she was a home builder because she was the eldest. I think in a family of 9 or 10. And so she was the home builder for the home. When she finished school, she became a local community worker, and she was one of the first ladies to ride a cycle in the village. When she met my father, he swept her off her feet and made her a housewife to look after us, the six. And then when we grew up, she became a businesswoman of repute in the Nairobi South area at a time when very few women were involved in economic activities as she was. Later, she became a farmer. Have you heard of the famous Chaviti farm? Yes. That was hers. And she became a community leader, serving as I do in Rotary. And so I started school, and I didn't do very well. In fact, I was normally in the 20s every exam time. Is that good? Yeah. And I felt that was fine. That was fine. And I used to come home and I used to play and I used to do all the things that little children do. One day, one evening, my mother pulled me aside and she told me, Leo, I told you I was Leo, could you think about playing a little less and working a little harder? My mother had a very soft, gentle voice, but her word was like a command. And so I said, okay. And you'll hear this okay again later on. And so I used to sit at the back of the class, and I decided, okay, let me give it some effort. And I moved to the front and started listening, paying attention. I started doing my homework. And hey presto, at the end of that year, in Standard 3, I went from my usual 20s to number? No. I went from number 20s to number 6. Yeah, give me a clap for that, huh? The school had never seen that because normally when you stay in the 20s, you stay in the 20s. Those in the first to 10 stay there. And so they considered what to do about this young Leo, and they decided to create a prize called Progress Prize. And so in that year, for the first time, I came forward at the Taifa Hall here at the University of Nairobi, came up to a stage like this, was presented with a book, strode off the stage, proud and smiling. And as I walked in the dark, as it is now, I heard my mother whisper, Leo, Leo. I felt proud and bursting with joy. And from that time, I always stayed in front. I always came up to receive a prize. I always ensured that my parents were happy with what I did in school. That was my first inflection point. I carried on in school, until I was in Standard 7 in 1973. Yeah. Towards the end of the year, as I was preparing for my exams, my father fell very ill. He went in and out of hospital a number of times. Eventually, he had to receive surgery. And, you know, children are normally not allowed into the hospital, but at that time he was a senior civil servant, so they made an exception and allowed us to visit him. And when we approached him, he didn't seem to know who we were. I told you, he spoke 3 languages fluently. He was mumbling like that child whose fingers are clenched. He didn't know who we were. But he left the hospital and he came home. And we had a big surprise saying, "Welcome home." We cut out figurines and everything for him. And we started a process of teaching him nursery rhymes, basic speech. And eventually he gained his speech back. Eventually he gained his movement. But he lost his short-term memory and so was unable to work anymore, a man who was at the top of his game. And you can appreciate that, what that means to a family. But as I told you, my mother had started from the strong side of things as a home builder, as a community worker. And so she took up the responsibilities through setting up this business I spoke about. And she ensured that we lacked for nothing. I decided to become serious with what I was doing. And my name became Leonard. Now, tragedy brings sometimes the opposite. By not being able to work, our father was more available. He was more friendly. And so began a period in which we talked. He became friends with all his children. I traveled with him weekends, driving him to Chaviti Farm and back and elsewhere. And he told me the stories because he could remember the past. And especially parents who have been in alliance, you can never forget that experience. So he would regale me that, his experiences in the civil service and what you must do and must not do. And so my father, our father, became our friend, and we looked after him, and we enjoyed his company. And so, from primary to high school to university, as a family, we rallied together to try and do the best in the circumstances that we were put in. When I finished university in 1984 and got a new job in January 85, my father passed on. Before I received my first salary, we were devastated. Even though we knew that he was unwell, we lost a constant companion, a leader, an example, who, when he was able, ensured that his brothers and sisters, members of the communities, got access to education, to hospitals, to weddings, to everything. he was fully involved. We rallied around our mother, took care of her. I have two of my sisters here. I want to thank them for what they did. And they did it for 38 years because she passed away at 87. My father passed at 52. And so I began my working life without my father. I dedicated my time towards engineering excellence and further learning, which I did into my early 30s. I was a senior bachelor. But even a senior bachelor eventually meets his match. And that match was in the shape, form, and manner of a beautiful, lovely, engaging, intelligent woman called Patricia Mainge. I asked her to marry me, and she said, okay. Remember the first okay? Another okay. And through the union, we were blessed with two lovely, beautiful, engaging daughters, Mweni and McKenna, who are here somewhere in the dark. So that's about 3 inflection points that my hands were gripped and slowly they're about halfway open. And I'm reaching out beyond my immediate family, but still there's a lot to be done. We enrolled our daughters in a Catholic school where, of course, there's strict regime in terms of spiritual formation. And through the process of getting them towards the First Holy Communion to confirmation, the parents had to be involved. And Leo, now Leonard, didn't know page 1 or page 50 or any page of the Holy Book. None. But I learned. Because I had to attend Saturday formation classes, I had to do this, I read. And I read and I read, so that by the time Mweni had her first Holy Communion, and before McKenna, I too was baptized at 45 and confirmed. Another inflection point going, huh? Now, this religious grounding, and I thank my daughters for that, were to come in handy about 2 years later. One afternoon after lunch, I had an appointment with a client, and I drove to the meeting, listening to music. And as I reached halfway, a car came out of the blue and blocked me. And as it blocked me, people jumped out of the car, screaming, shouting, with guns in their hands. Many of them. One came to the front, one came to my left, one came to my right. I had stopped. And they were screaming, shouting that I opened the door. What would you do? In such circumstances, time moves very slowly. I knew that in the next couple of seconds, I'd either be dead or I'll be okay. And it depended on the decision I was going to make then and then. And I decided to open the door. I opened it, they opened the doors and jumped in on me. Hit me, smacked me, boxed me, everything me, robbed me, and threw me out of the car into the ditch and left the car on with all the doors open. Meanwhile, crowds of people had gathered 100 meters there and 100 meters back. When you survive something like that, it calls for a time of introspection, a time of thinking, why am I here? How did I get through that? What's the meaning of my presence here? Could I do more with my life than I currently do? Could I impact more? I immediately started becoming more open in the way I conducted my affairs, the way I run my office, and my colleagues in the office are here. I think they noticed the difference after that happened. I started giving them better terms of service. And lunch and everything. Yes, you realize it's bigger, it's better. There's something more to what we're doing. And so from there, I started taking better care of myself. I started walking, I started running, I started going to the gym. And Patricia and I were fortunate that finally we were being able to build a home that we loved and wanted. And so I set about that with my engineering background. And as I approached 50, in fact, just a month or two before, and the house was going to be opened, I became very ill, as in very, very, very ill. And the doctors didn't quite know what to do, in, out, but eventually they did. And it turned out that I was afflicted by the same problem that killed my father and killed my paternal grandmother. I was out of the woods, but I was devastated, disappointed that I was going to leave my wife and my children the same way my father did at an early age, and the way I had felt about it, and the way I was trying to do my best so that my children would not suffer the same fate as I. And so I cut back after that in my work schedule. I used to work almost every day. I changed to Monday to Friday. I started creating time to be with them, to do other things other than business, other than engineering. And I started looking out for social-based activities that I could reach out to people, care for them, make an impact. That started coming to my mind. I started in the church. Remember, I used to read in church. I started reading in church. I started being part of different committees, but I felt, this is not enough. It's not challenging for this guy who said okay in standard 3 and who sits in the front of the class. Eventually, long story short, I joined the Rotary Club of Karen. I joined it, and I was impressed that sky was not the limit in this organization, that we could get involved in projects, small, medium, large, depending on your appetite. And I had a huge appetite and a sense of urgency to do good, to share, to care. 2 years later, I was president of my club. A year later, I was assistant governor covering 3 or 4 clubs. After that, I was chair of the executive committee that brings all the districts' head boys and girls together. Head boy and girl. And then eventually, 3 years ago, I was elected to be district governor of Rotary International District 9212, covering Kenya, Ethiopia, South Sudan. And I've had huge opportunities to visit the over 140 clubs, the close to 4,000 Rotarians, but more importantly, to meet with their communities, to meet with the children, to see the impact and the change that this organization is able to do, and of which I head. A young man, Leo, with clenched fingers, who through a series of events has had his fingers and palms open up until they're out flat. I feel so honored to be at the head of this organization. I feel so honored to be part of a group of 1.4 million people all over the world committed to make positive, lasting change in this world, and as we do so, in ourselves. I'm coming to the end of my term, and I'm looking to bigger, better, more exciting opportunities in the community service space. And I'm having fun at it. Yeah? From Leo to Leonard, I'm now Leo again. So DG Leo, I sign off by saying again, I am Leo. Here I am. Thank you.